Welcome to the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am your host, Dean Phillips. And of course, the Destiny of Manufacturing is powered by the Precision Metal Forming Association, where I am, of course, the technical director at. I'm proud to have with me today Jeff Umlor, who is the president at Walker Tool and Die. Jeff, right off the bat, tell us why you think the next 5 years are going to be amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dean. It's my pleasure to be here today. And amazing. Wow, that's predicting the next 5 years is really kind of interesting because the last 5 years that we've had have been like no other in my 36 years of doing this. You know, what I look at in the next 5 years, I think it's going to kind of be stable. Kind of, no big, huge upticks or downfalls, but I would call it, from what I'm seeing and hearing, is stable, but it's also going to be a time of transformation. Um, I think there's a lot of things that people need to focus on, but kind of the top three things that I look at are our people, kind of our process, how we're doing things, and kind of a product mix. I think are going to be key things in the next 5 years in the tool and die industry.
Can you so when you talk about product mix, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So what I see is it's tough right now as a standalone tool and die shop, to just hit that top line revenue that you need every year, just basically building sheet metal stamping dies. Um, we don't do any production here, so we're constantly looking for other ways to maybe add low volume production. How can we use our engineering services to help tier ones, OEMs, help develop product as 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 technology keeps evolving, the part geometries are getting more difficult, the materials are getting tougher, trying to lightweight stuff and trying to be that company that can help our customers be on the front end of a lot of that part development. So we can do it ahead of time through simulation, engineering, prior to getting into the press for the first time with some of these tools.
Yeah. And when you talk about uh harder materials and being a resource for manufacturers, how do you like when you're thinking that through, what is your process to kind of, all right, I want to make sure that I illustrate that we can do high strength materials, and I want to make sure that I show that we can be a good partner to these companies. What does that look like from your end?
So some of it is just showing them some of the tools that we've designed and built in the past. Um, some of it is, even in the quoting process of telling or bringing these parts into auto form and kind of developing a process even as we're quoting it and presenting that to the customer, and with some of that feedback that we're getting from auto form versus real time activities on the shop floor. We're doing a lot of part scans when we're coming out of draw stations and stuff like that, and feeding that back into simulation so we can kind of get a correlation between what Autoform is saying and what we're getting, out on the shop floor. And as we can kind of fine tune our settings and Autoform and stuff like that, we've got a lot more confidence in what we can present to the customer on the front end.
Yeah. Yeah, closing the loop, so to speak. You're
Yep.
basically taking that feedback. Now, is that an automated thing or is that more manual?
It's a little bit more manual,
Okay.
so trying to tweak some of the settings to match what we're getting on the shop floor.
I
Yep.
I gotcha. Yeah. No, but that's important. I think a lot of times people just they get out and they're playing hit and miss. They're doing it and then they're responding, but they're never getting that information back into the system to
Right.
be able to utilize at the end of the day. And uh,
Yeah.
how did you get into this, Jeff?
So, yeah, I've been doing this. I've actually been at Walker for 36 years. It's the only shop that I've worked for. my dad was a die maker. Some of his uncles were die makers. I had a grandfather and some other uncles that were police officers. So that was my choice. I was going to do one of those two things, and I knew it, from probably middle school, early high school, that that's what I wanted to do. Kind of went through it's called the Kent Career Tech Center here as part of a high school program and kind of a precision machining program. I fell in love with it, so I started here part-time in high school and then full-time right out of high school, and started sweeping floors, got into my tool and die apprenticeship, and kind of just been able to, work in various different areas of the shop throughout this time, whether it be after I got my tool and die journeyman's card, I went into kind of CAD CAM modeling, 3D surfacing, CNC programming, then from there into different leadership roles in engineering, operations, business development, and I've been in my current role now for about a year and a half.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
And you're doing a phenomenal job too,
Thank you. Thank you.
and I'm not intimately connected to your company, and no, you didn't pay me any money to say that, but I think you're doing a great job with it.
Well,
We appreciate you.
I still enjoy it. I'm still excited to get out of bed and come to work every day. I'm passionate about this industry. I see I've seen over the last few years kind of a growth in communication between die shops. Um, you know, 5, 10 years ago, it was everybody held everything close to their vest. I think being involved in the PMA is a great organization for tool shops. I mean, just recently, within the last couple of years, we've kind of started off the tool and die division again.
Mhm.
Which I've been a part of, and I think those are times where as shops are struggling for people and resources where we can kind of, you know, be friendly competitors and work together because we're all dealing with the same problems. And the
Yeah.
more we can work together to solve those, the better off we're going to be as an industry.
Yeah, yeah, and we thank you for being part of the tool and die division, which is part of the PMA, and uh, in general, it is a very good collaborative, and I want to use collaborative versus competitive.
Yeah,
It's not that you're not competitors, but it is collaborative in that the reason you're doing that is for the greater good, uh, and for the industry, because let's be honest, if our competitors go out of business, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get that business. It could very well mean
right.
that it's going to go overseas or that we're going
Yep,
to lose it altogether, because if I can only rely on one shop, I'm less likely to keep business here than I am overseas. It's just,
absolutely.
it's something we have to be careful of. Now,
Yeah.
you said that you got involved in this because of going to a tech school for high school.
Yep.
Uh, what were some of the things you took? Because I went the other way. I went to a vocational high school and I took
Mm,
machine shop, but I went to the electronics side. That was my
okay.
field
Yeah.
when I went there. But it changed my life. Now I don't know if you would say the same thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, in our high school at the time, and we had all the stuff that they don't have now. I mean, we had a wood shop, we had a metal shop, small engines, all of that stuff. And so my junior and senior year, while I was there, the Kent Career Tech Center offered a precision machining program, and it was a very neat school. I learned a ton there. Kind of our first year was focused on a lot of manual machining, from mills to lathes to EDMs. And then the second year was more CNC programming and working with, the CNC machines that we had there. And, you know, I mean, I'm still friends with people that I went to school with there. Corey Chamberlain from
Oh,
Stamplicity was a
yeah.
classmate of mine in there. I mean, so it's, you got lifelong friends that you made in there. And, it was back then, it was tough to get into a die shop, into an apprenticeship. I mean, it was, interview processes and, put your application into as many places as you can. But it was a good way to really kind of explore different options. I sit on the advisory board for that same program today. So it's a neat way to still stay involved.
Great. That's fantastic. To me, that's more impactful than anything, because you're making a difference, you're not only to the industry, but you're making individual connections that are changing these people's lives, and that's how I look at it. I I was on my Our school has since become defunct. It became a math magnet school, but we still have a web page and everything else. And I asked the question, I said, how many of you use what you do on a regular basis or don't do it at all? The majority all are still use the information they learned at least at least once a month, you know.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I think that's really a big difference of how this
Yeah.
industry can change your life, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
At, what what would be, if you look back at that, what would be one of the biggest areas that you would say to somebody who's just going through the program now? What would you tell them? Make sure you do this. What would that thing be?
Get, go in there every day with an attitude that you want to learn and work. Um, there's so many opportunities, not just at Walker Tool and Bite, but just in manufacturing in general. And most of these jobs are high tech, high skilled jobs,
Uh-huh.
where you've got opportunities to problem solve, continuous learning opportunities. And in most companies like Walker during your apprenticeship program, we're going to pay for any schooling that you need, so you can be learning on the job and making money all at the same time.
Yeah. And that's pretty
It-
nice.
yeah, yeah. But I would say, whatever career path people choose, whether it's in manufacturing or accounting or healthcare, whatever it's, you've got to do something that you love.
Hmm.
Otherwise it just gets to be a job versus a career.
Yeah. I To this day I still remember above uh, our auditorium it had a marquee up there and it said, whatever you do, let it be done well.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's
that's
something
great.
I think is really important. If you go
Mhm.
in with the right attitude, like you said, and you're willing to learn, it's amazing what you'll take out of this opportunity. Uh,
Yeah. Yep.
now, Now, industry wide, what are some of the things that you see changing on the landscape over the next 5 years? How do you see the industry changing?
Um, I do believe, kind of like I mentioned earlier, that it's going to be really, upfront simulation engineering driven. Um, trying to help solve those problems. But I think if you're not starting to dabble and investigate opportunities for AI within your businesses, you're going to fall behind very fast. I mean,
Hmm.
there's so many I would call repetitive tasks that get done, kind of on the front end, for sure, whether it be in estimating or, some of the regular office tasks of, invoicing, purchasing. I think you've got to really look at those and, try to partner with folks that have done it and share ideas.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the AI is going to play a huge part. I think I will say this, that I see a lot of people leveraging it for the obvious things, the chat GPT things, the office tasks, the mundane things. But I think that when you start looking at how it can go through, if you think about it from a spreadsheet standpoint of organizationally and finding your outliers and eliminating those highs and lows to where you're more consistent, can really help you change the way you look at your business even.
Mhm.
And that only comes from data. Um,
Right.
and how are you guys utilizing data in your work in the tool and die world?
It's funny, yes. I mean, most of my decisions I make based on the company are data driven decisions. I mean, we've got we've got a kind of a homegrown ERP system. We call it our Walker Job Management System. I mean, I've got more data and spreadsheets and stuff in there that, we generally pull them monthly. We can get information, on a quicker basis if we need it. But,
Mhm.
without using data to drive your decisions, I mean, you're just either making them blind or by a gut feel. And those are always tough to do sometimes. I mean, granted, I mean, we all have to make those gut feel decisions sometimes, but if I can use data to drive those decisions, I can get buy-in a lot quicker.
Yeah,
When you show people the numbers, they you can't really argue with that.
right. I I always heard this, and I've heard it attributed a lot of different ways, but it's, in God we trust, all others bring data, you know.
Yeah, I like that.
And I do feel
Yeah,
that's true. And I've
yeah.
worked in a data end of it when I worked for Link Systems for the controls company, because we had our management system. And one of the things that we did was I'd go into plants and they couldn't get an obvious change made. One plant I went into, and they had two presses across an aisle from each other. Whenever they had to make a tool change, they had to use the fork truck and drive in where the other machine. So they had to stop one machine when they made the change on the other one, and vice versa. Obvious situation. They were like, it's going to cost too much money. Until they saw how much money they were losing
Yeah.
because of that. Once you can attribute downtime to a cost, people can make decisions so much faster
Oh
because
yeah.
they have good data. Oh,
Right.
yeah. Uh,
Especially when there's money involved, right?
Absolutely. And I always tell people the other aspect of it is once you could show a value that you've acquired because of something, maybe you make a change. Maybe you add a finish, maybe a coating to a tool, and now you could prove it lasts longer. Once I have that data to prove it lasts longer, it makes it so much easier to roll that out across the board throughout the plant too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What are some of the other areas that you feel are changing the way we used to do things from, like you said, even 5 years ago to now?
So we have really implemented a lot of lights out machining on our
Hmm.
CNC mills, where we don't have to staff a full staff of second shift machinists, because they're hard to find. And we can, let those machines run over the weekend on finished cuts.
Wow.
And you know, in most of our quality loops that we run through, and if we get into the press and have to do a quality loop, run right back through simulation. So there
Mhm.
again, we're tying that that communication tight back between simulation and the shop floor, and then our designs are updated to that. So when we send a final design to our customer, it matches what they're getting, in the finished tool.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for your time, for being here today. I know we
Yeah.
tried to make this work, and we've kind of couldn't make it work last week. So I want to thank you
Yeah.
so much for
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
not only uh, your leadership within the tool and die division, but your leadership within our organization. A lot of times people don't realize the PMA is an association, which means we're made up of members just like you. And
Yeah.
your membership makes a difference to everybody. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And like I said, I love talking about this stuff. I could go on for hours with you. So, yeah, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, in other words, we can look forward to Jeff Umler part two a little bit
Sure,
later
let's
on.
do it. Let's
All
do it.
right. All
All
right. This
right.
has been the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast, and I'm your host, Dean Phillips.